Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Brindza, and I'm the Senior Curator and James and Louise Glasser Curator of Art of the American West at the Tucson Museum of Art. Welcome to Cookies with a Curator. Today, I have with me Walter Piehl, who is an artist in the Art of the American West collection at the Tucson Museum of Art, and a very interesting artist, I must say, and I look forward to speaking with him. Welcome, Walter.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so you know how this format goes. We got to start off talking about some cookies or some favorite treats.
It's what I've heard.
Yeah. And so, can you tell me about one of your favorite types of cookies?
I would be a cookie guy. I love cookies. I love all sorts of sweet things, but it's unfortunate that 15 years ago I found out I'm type 2 diabetic, so I have to watch my kind of cookie that I eat.
Okay.
So my favorite cookie of all time, I think, is a peanut butter cookie. And as a kid growing up, I loved the way my mother would kind of mash down just slightly the ball of dough so it had the marks of a fork on the top of it. And
Yes.
then as when I left home and I got married, Becky on occasion would put candy covered peanuts or just peanuts into a peanut butter cookie. So M&Ms in a peanut butter cookie, that would have to be probably my favorite cookie. But now she makes some kind of an oatmeal cookie with sugar substitute and lots of other walnuts and things. So that's what I eat normally now. But I do have fond memories of peanut butter cookies on a regular basis that I really very seldom do get to eat anymore.
Oh, okay. But you still have that memory.
Oh,
I
yes,
mean, you
wonderful
have
memory.
you have the process of the fork.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the pork marks, yeah. Was very
Yeah.
visual.
And I bet if you were to taste one now, you'd be like, doesn't taste the same as my memory.
Yeah, maybe not.
Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
you're still able to enjoy treats
Yes,
despite, things that have happened health wise.
yeah,
But yeah, thank you for sharing that with us.
yes.
I had in mind today a shortbread cookie, with all that buttery
Mm.
goodness. Yeah.
Yes, that would be
Yeah.
good. Also shortbread.
You can't beat
Shortbread,
that.
I didn't eat a lot of shortbread cookies, but I did eat shortbread when I was working for the U.S. Forest Service out in the Beaverhead National Forest in Montana. One summer, I worked on a forest fire crew and a building crew out there, and they had shortbread cookies in a can from the Second World War.
Oh,
And they were still very good. This was back in the 60s. They were still very good.
oh, wow. I bet that would have been quite the experience to try
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. So now I'm craving some sugar. Maybe we should switch over to talking about art and we can
Okay,
have our sugar that way.
sure.
Yeah. So how about if you tell us a little bit about yourself, anything from your background or how you got into art and what kind of artwork that you do?
Oh, goodness. How long is this program?
uh,
Uh, you know, I grew up, I was born into I would have to call it a very, very hard scrabble, uh, rural farm ranch kind of situation without electricity, not without reliable electricity. They had a wind charger and a row of batteries in the basement. So you did have a little bit of light and could run a refrigerator. And that's about all I remember. And no indoor plumbing. And so I, for entertainment, I drew a lot as a kid. I drew, I guess, they kept feeding me these newsprint with blue line tablets, and I filled them up one after another with scenes of cowboys and Indians and Second World War bombers and all of that sort of thing. So drawing was always a big part of my life as a youth, and I guess that just kind of carried over when I got into going to school, even though they didn't have art classes in that little town of Marion, North Dakota. Um, I was kind of one of the people who was sort of the class artist. I had a affinity for and I liked to draw. So if they needed an illustration of something, I would do my best at it. And so that continued on. When it came time to go to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but a friend of mine talked about a college in Moorhead, Minnesota, which was a Concordia College, which was a church school, Lutheran church school. I went there because he said, I said, well, I might take art if I go to college. I don't know what else I would do. And so I did go to Concordia then. I took art, and I was I was a fish out of water there. I didn't understand the kind of work that they were doing. I think I absorbed from an excellent teacher by the name of Cy Running, excellent lectures and demonstrations and critiques mostly that he did on basic design and composition and all of the design elements and that sort of thing. But I never was able to really embrace the kind of work that they pushed there, which was a rather stylized landscape, stylized peoplescape, stylized still life approach to it. Because what little bit of art that I saw, it was Remington and Russell and the illustrations on the cover of magazines with Norman Rockwell type illustrations. And I really couldn't embrace that. I hadn't seen enough of it. And when I left there, I did not feel very fulfilled. I just didn't feel very competent. I had a teaching degree, but I didn't feel good about going out and teaching it because I really didn't feel like an artist myself. I applied to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. I don't know why they ever accepted me because I had such a weak portfolio, I think, now looking back at it. But I think they were desperate for graduate students. And so they took a chance on me. It didn't take me long when I was there before one of my instructors, Dave Brown, said, I hear you go on weekends and do rodeo things. And I said, well, yeah, my family's in rodeo. My dad has rodeo livestock. He produces rodeos. We also provide stock to other rodeos. And yeah, I do that all the time. And he said, well, why don't you do that in your artwork? And I said, well, at Concordia, anything that smacked of sentimentality or romance was forbidden. It was just discouraged. And he said, nothing should be discouraged. He said, you should embrace that a little bit, because he said it would be so much better than those paintings, those lame and insipid landscapes that you are doing.
Oh.
And I didn't know the meaning of those words. So that was kind of a shock to me.
I bet.
Yes, it was. It was a shock. And so conversations with him and with other art students and with other faculty put me on a quest. And I found that I would love to embrace rodeo. I didn't know how to approach it because I thought of it kind of as a, not photographically, but trying to get maybe a little more energy into it than just a photograph. And it was mostly black and white photographs at the time. But I thought of a group of people who dealt with chaos and who dealt with energy and dynamics of movement. And that would be the Italian futurists.
Okay.
And so I started doing research and reading about the futurists, and I found, yeah, these guys have it right. They maybe were anarchists as political people, and they perhaps were perhaps a little too much in terms of cubism. They had they had a style that embraced cubism because that was the new modern art style at the time. But they embraced a cubism that dealt with movement and dynamics and the flow of energy. And I could see that working. But I tried some paintings that had a bit of that cubist drawings, mostly studies at that time, that had a little bit of a cubist repetition like the futurists had.
Okay.
multiple images, transparent images as it moved through space. But I felt, it didn't take me long to find out that I felt the flow of rodeo arena action at what is called rough stock action, bucking bulls and bucking horses, that was more curvilinear, more not quite so regimented in a kind of a wooden soldier marching kind of clicking along like the futurists and all of their tanks moving and planes flying and the charge of military cavalry units. It was very cubistic and very angular. And rodeo in the flow is more of a curvilinear, and that seemed to fit better. And so that was the start of my quest for rodeo, and it allowed me to stay at the University of North Dakota, because I think they would have washed me out if I hadn't found something that would have worked for me. And I was so thankful to them that they encouraged me, and it's set me on a path for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow. So it was really including what you knew, where you came from, that ignited the spark as
Yes.
to how you were creating your work, the style you chose. I
Yes.
think that's very important. Yeah.
Well, there was also another aspect of it that I should not fail to mention, and that is fear. I had a
Okay.
great fear of the haystack.
Oh.
I did not want to go back to the haystack.
Oh,
As
I
much as I
see.
loved livestock and the rodeo element of it, I did not love being in the haystack when it was 104 degrees and you're up there pitching hay that's being bucked up to you, and
Yes.
in hay that's up to your neck, and moving it around and the heat coming off of it. I hate it. So fear of the haystack was a big motivator for me also.
I think I can understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a work that's in the TMA collection, which I'm very excited about. We received it a few years back. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I can. I can. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up. Looking at Handful, which is from your Sweetheart of the Rodeo series that you likely did in the early 2000s. And I must say that this is one of the favorites that we have in our gallery. Our students that come through on tours gravitate to this piece.
Ah,
And so I'm glad that we have it as part of our collection.
well, I'm very happy that it's there also. I will say.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about this piece or the style
Sure.
you use?
Well, yeah, it's not unlike a lot of other paintings that I was doing at the time. This one perhaps does not have as much of the multiplicity of limbs, perhaps, or movement in the horse's head, but you can see some of that aspect in the cowboy's right leg and his right boot. It's shown in 2, 3 different places. His free hand, which is the one he waves back behind his hat there, or he has behind his hat, and uses it as balance, is moving. It has a couple different images, and I guess the hind legs of the horse kind of suggest a couple different places that those legs were, or a blur perhaps in there. And when I first started painting these rodeo paintings, I retained the kind of limitations of color that I had been encouraged to work with when I was a student at Concordia, which was, as my professor, Cy Running, called sophisticated color. It was the color, earth colors and muted colors and grade colors and all of that. And my first rodeo paintings reflected that. But that didn't take me too long. I do get it. I do somehow things come to me, and I said, wow, the more active the color is, the more active the piece is. The brighter the color, it adds energy to the piece. It's not just about the drawing and the shapes and all of that, because the color can also be a very plus factor when it comes to trying to show that dynamics of movement between a horse and a rodeo rider. So that is probably where the bright color comes from. And I've used that in various degrees because that Sweetheart of the Rodeo is an ongoing series. And it's gone through many different changes. Some of them rather subtle stylistic changes, and some of them rather abrupt. Some of them more abstract than this. Very few of them probably have any more detail than what this particular piece has. It was part of a touring exhibit. I've toured painting exhibits many times throughout the upper Northwest, or I would say North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, some into Minnesota.
Okay.
And I had shows at the North Dakota, or at the Cowboy PRCA Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs, at the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Museum. So I toured exhibits a lot, and oftentimes these works were for sale. And so this one was purchased, I believe, by Patrick Clinton and Elizabeth Dane out of an exhibit that I had in Great Falls, Montana at the Paris Gibson Art Center there, a wonderful art center in a big old mansion of a schoolhouse. I think that's where they purchased this thing out of a touring exhibit at that time. And as I mentioned earlier, there, Pat Clinton had passed away, but Elizabeth Dane then, when she moved out of Tucson and donated this one to the museum, she moved out to the East Coast and she donated another piece to the Rockwell Museum in Corning, New York. So I thank her very much. I have not communicated with her now for several years. The only thing that when I saw this painting in the flesh several years ago, when I first visited it at the Tucson Museum, the only thing I might have had many reservations about, I'd like to change this, I'd like to change that. The thing that I would like to change the most on it is I think my signature was too big.
Oh. Oh, I like your signature.
Well, I mean, the style of it's okay. It's just too big. I don't know. I was doing maybe big signatures on big canvases at that time. And, so anyway.
Yeah, but
so that's maybe that may be enough on that piece, unless you have some specific questions about it, I guess.
No, I think that's wonderful. Thank you for that background on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we really enjoy having that here. And it's very different stylistically than most of the other work in the Art of the American West collection. So it's a very interesting contrast. And if we have other work of Bucking Bronx, for example, in sculpture, to juxtapose it with your work, it creates new conversations.
Yes, and I'm glad for that. And I, most of people that follow the lifestyle or embrace Western Americana, they are Remington and Russell fans, and I think Remington and Russell are the best in the kind of work that they did, the best that there is out there. But it is a style of work that is very much dependent on photographs and photographic documentation, and then copying the photograph and all of that. And so I hope it is of great contrast to that. And I do hear that from time to time. And during a show that I had at the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs, at the opening, there were some cowboys that came through there. And although I've heard this from several cowboys, one bareback rider said to me, he said, "Man, that's the first time I ever saw a painting of a bareback rider that felt like the ride." And I've been thrown off horses. I did try my hand at a little bit of bareback riding and some bull riding, but I found out that I was much better suited in the announcer's stand. My father put me to work one day when the announcer didn't show up. He said, "You've been to college, here, go up there and take the mic and do the announcing today." So that started me in a career that lasted, as a part-time career for 20, 30 years, announcing rodeos in the region.
Oh, okay. Wow. Everyone has side gigs, and I think,
Yeah,
again, that really informed the way you create work.
yes,
Yeah. So I know we don't have a piece in front of us for you to actually demonstrate your creative process, but could you give us some kind of walkthrough as to where you find your images? Do you use photographs or is it from your mind? And how do you apply the paint to canvas? Like, can you walk us through that somehow?
sure. You got a couple days?
Oh no. How about little snippets?
Okay, I've never worked from photographs. They're out late the last few years. Now that photography and motorized cameras can capture so many more aspects of a rodeo action. Let's just say of the rodeo action, whether it be a barrel racer, a bull rider, whatever. Um, you can see so many different positions that you could never see in photographs back from the 60s because they just didn't have motor drives or guys didn't use them or they didn't get enough photographs to document an 8-second ride with 50, 60 uh, photographs.
Hmm.
And I have witnessed enough rodeo rides, I would say thousands and thousands of them myself, that I can conjure up all of the different positions perhaps, and some that horses and bulls maybe can't even get into. But I can see this in my mind, and there's an endless variety and kind of a rolling should it go this way? Should it go that way? Oh, I want to start another bareback. I want to do a bull rider. That series of bull rider paintings is called the American Minotaur series because I feel another going back to the Greek Minotaurs. In order to be a good bull rider, you got to become part of the bull. So that series is called the American Minotaur, and I approach it the same way as I do the Sweethearts of the Rodeo, which I feel the horses are the real sweethearts of the rodeo. Um, so I start with I used to do a lot of study drawings, and then when I felt I had something, a composition, how to approach the composition, I would start it out sometimes with paint, sometimes with charcoal. I find now that I use colored chalk to kind of lay out the first basic composition. Then I
Oh.
would go into thinned out paint to outline and make corrections on that chalk drawing. And then after that, it's just kind of dip the big brushes in and have at it. And uh, to get energy into it, uh, like the abstract expressionists, the New York School of Abstract Expressionism, part of the energy I think of the piece should also come from the way in which I apply the paint. And hopefully my brush strokes and the force in which the paint is applied and it drips and runs because it's a celebration of paint in and of itself, that hopefully will add to the energy of the piece. And so the first uh, applications of paint can create, I create usually quite a bit of chaos. And that is the fun part. That is the energetic part of the painting. And then
Okay.
after that happens, there are many times you have to go back in and think, oh my God, what did I do to this thing? And you have to try to bring it back from the dead because it may be um, total chaos and nothing that works. But if you bring it back, it seems like those that give you problems, sometimes in the long run, they are richer because of the layering and the edges and the overlays of paint. I have one going in the studio right now that was a disaster. Was that it just was it became so chaotic after my first application of paint, and now I'm having to. And that is for me the puzzle that makes it interesting. This is the mystery for me of painting is solving this visual problem, not only of composition and color and design, but also solving the problem of that's created by the subject matter and its movement and trying to make that work in the space of the canvas.
Oh, I see. So you're calling it a visual problem,
Yeah.
and you're looking for ways to solve it. And
Yes.
so, like when you were saying you were bringing something back from the dead, it's maybe your first run through and you don't like a color or a position, or what does that really mean?
Yes, well, I don't like, yeah, all of those things. It maybe the color got muddy. That's why I don't paint with oil paints, because I'm impatient. I want to go back into it right away or soon. And I found with the oil paint, I couldn't keep my hands off of it, and it all would turn to a neutral gray. And so the acrylics, since they dry fast, and I start out with thinner washes of paint and they dry fast, I can go back into it within sometimes minutes even. And I can rework it, I can cover it up, I can use correcting fluid on it to really cover up some egregious kinds of mistakes. White paint is my correcting fluid. You know, I was told not to use white paint and mix white paint with colors when I was a student at one point. And uh, well, I don't mix, I guess I do mix some, but I use it. You have to block out areas that don't work and you kind of work them over. I don't usually, I don't, I think as a matter of common practice, I do not gesso over a canvas and start over. I try to, there's usually something in there I want to save, and there's something that I can build the rest of the painting around. Sometimes it's a small thing. Sometimes it doesn't take much of bringing it back from the dead or much fine tuning, but sometimes you have to resort to some heroics to paint out and to rethink and paint.
Okay, so you move fast when you do this.
Yep.
Um, I remember seeing a video of you, just taking the paintbrush quickly across the canvas and just being in the moment, doing what feels right to you within that moment. And I think that's also a very important thing to note when you're working, that this isn't something necessarily premeditated. Is that a correct assumption, or?
Only it's premeditated in a sense that I know I'm going to be putting paint on forcefully at times, and that's the premeditation. Other than that, how I'm going to do it exactly, no. It's uh, collateral damage often happens, but also collateral enhancement can also be brought into this, the same way that Willem de Kooning painted. I suppose even, and Jackson Pollock. A lot of these accidents enhance the painting. Accidents are not necessarily bad things. I've had some great accidents that have saved paintings, that have led me to be a better painter and make the painting come off better than if I had slowly and very precisely put it together.
Okay. So can you tell me if there are any latest projects that you would like to share?
Well, all of my work deals with Western Americana. I have I've done lots of things in the past. I've done a series of paintings of minotaurs and centaurs because I found them great symbols, metaphors for the cowboys and cowgirls of the West.
Mm-hmm.
I use female centaurs rather than male centaurs, and then and minotaurs are men. So I've done some very paintings that are symbols of and metaphoric paintings as well. But I've also done a lot of still life paintings that deal with saddles and boots. And I try to get the energy in those paintings also with color and also with uh, energy of paint application. So even though the saddle isn't moving, hopefully the energy of color and my paint application will bring some energy into it. You can see when I put a brush stroke down, it's put down with energy. It's applied with energy. And I hope that energy also imbues the final project with some energy. So still life paintings. I've worked on a lot of the action paintings of rodeo are probably my favorite subject, and it's probably what I'm most noted for.
Okay, well, I will have to look up some of these still life works. I'm very curious. Yes. Well, let me ask another question, shifting gear just a bit. Has COVID-19 have had any impact on your work within this past year?
I would like to be able to say that I'm in the studio more. We've stayed home more, have traveled less, and so COVID-19 has produced a lot more work. I'd like to say that, but I can't. I don't know. I'm in the studio more, but I'm retired from my full-time teaching job, which I held at Minot State University for, 45 plus years, I think, in some way or another, and part-time for a number of years. I do have a lot more time, but I'm a guy who has to have other things going also. I rodeoed very heavy in various ways throughout my life. I am not doing that much anymore. In the summertime, I don't go to do many of them anymore. My sons aren't competing anymore. I'm in the studio more, but I don't feel I'm getting any more work done than I did when I was teaching full time. So maybe I'm just getting lazy. Maybe I'm reading more. Maybe I'm trying to organize my studio and my archives a little better. Stuff I put off for decades.
Yeah, well, that's your process. That's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Are there other topics you'd like to cover today?
Well, I was looking at that list of suggested topics. There were highlights. I've had some highlights in my career. I consider placing a work in the collection of the Tucson Museum to be a highlight. You always want to place your work, I think, in fine museums. And one of the things that just popped in my head is something I've thought about from time to time. I thought it was so appropriate. The ancient Egyptians used to say, to speak the name of the dead is to make them live again. So when you have these tourists coming through the museum, and a docent talks about Walter Piehl, whether they pronounce it right or not, maybe in 50 years, 20 years, it will bring me back from the next world a little bit. So there's that. I'm glad to place work in really good museums for the exposure that the work gets and the validation, I think, that your work receives by being accepted into a really fine museum. And one other highlight perhaps was that back in, I think, 2009, I think it was, the Bush Foundation that operates out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and it operates in a 3-state area, from a banking foundation. Archibald Bush and Edith Bush put together this wonderful foundation doing good works. And at one time, they were very engaged in all of their funds went to the support and the promotion of art and artists. And back in that day, I was one of the very, very lucky people to be selected out of the 3-state area to receive a $100,000 Enduring Artist Award. So that's got to be considered. And with that award, I was able to buy a better horse trailer to haul my artwork around it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are wonderful accomplishments to mention. Yes.
That's right. That's right. And I still have a good horse trailer.
Oh, good. That's important.
Yeah.
So with that, maybe we should close for today. And thank you so much, Walter, for talking with me. It's good to get some insight into the artist's mind.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to visit with you again. As we mentioned before, I'm looking forward to getting back to Tucson next winter for sure. And thank you very much once again for having my work in your Western collection and for the invitation to do this little Zoom interview.
Yeah, we're glad to have it. So this is Christine Brindza from the Tucson Museum of Art signing off. Thank you all. Bye.